Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Marcia from Mom Hunts Dead People. If you're new here, Mom Hunts Dead People is normally a genealogy site, but recently we've been going over the Lizzie Borden trial. We've been going over all of the official court records from the investigation to the trial itself, and reviewing this through the eyes of not only a genealogist, but from a true crime junkie. So whether you're a dead hunter or a trial hunter, this is for you. And today we're reviewing Adeline B. Churchill and her statements to the inquest. And yes, everyone, I did get my neck brace off. My vertebrae are officially fused, and I can even turn my head. To get more on that story, go visit the member space over on Coffee. Now, let's dig in. Adeline B. Churchill. What is your full name? Adeline Buffington Churchill. You live in the next house to Mr. A.J. Borden? Yes, sir. Up or downstairs? Downstairs. And all over the house, there is only one family. How long have you lived there? With the exception of we moved away from the house a while the day the granite mill burned in October, and we were away until May. I think we have lived there the rest of the time, 42 years. So you were well acquainted with the Bordens? Very well acquainted. Do your windows look out on their yard? On the south side of the house they do. Is that the side where your living part is? The kitchen was on the south side and 2 lodging rooms. The sitting room windows face the west. One long window in the sitting room faces south. Do I have a tendency to give everybody a southern accent? Yes. Because if you're asking me to do a Bostonian accent, you are asking the wrong southern woman. And after watching the Karen Reed trial, I learned that the people from Fall River apparently have a weird accent, at least according to one trooper who resided in Canton. Were you at home that Thursday morning? I was down street. I went from the house near 11 o'clock to do my marketing. Do you know where the Bordens marketed? I don't. I think to Whitehead's. I'm not sure. Who usually did the marketing for the Bordens? Mr. or Mrs. Borden? Mrs. Borden went a good many times out. I don't know that. I don't know their private affairs at all. Up until 11 o'clock. Had you been at home? I was at home until about 11. Had you seen any of the household or anybody else in the yard? I saw Mr. Borden, I should think about 9 o'clock, the hour he usually goes down the street. I was in my kitchen doing kitchen work. I happened to see him out in the yard. You saw him going out? Yes, he was going as if he had been out in the yard, out in the barn, coming out around the back steps. He went out on the street? I don't know. When I looked at him, he was standing there by the steps as if he was headed for the street to the west. You didn't see him go to the street? No, sir, I was tending my work. I did not look after. He went by. Did you see any other members of the household? No, sir. I saw the girl later washing the windows. How much later was it she was out washing windows? It might have been 10 o'clock. I can't tell. Washing windows on the outside? Yes, sir. And that does actually matter. I don't think that's been covered previously. I personally just assumed that Bridget was washing the windows outside, but that is a distinction because nobody actually said she was washing windows outside previously. They just said she was washing windows, but she could have been washing the windows from the inside. The inside of your windows need to get clean too. But if she's washing them outside, there's the chance she wouldn't have seen somebody sneak in to murder the Bordens. But if she had been washing them inside, how could she not have seen them, since it was an upstairs and downstairs murder? So good clarification on the Inquisitor's part. How long you say she was out there, that you saw her washing windows? I can't tell. I stepped into my bedroom for something. I saw her throwing water up onto the parlor window. She was washing the parlor window then? Yes, sir. Do you remember how long before that time she had been out washing the windows? Whether that same week or the week before? I don't think she washed windows but once a week, and Thursday was generally the day. It was a habit to wash windows once a week? She generally did. Did you see her wash any other window besides the parlor window? No, sir. Did you see any other member of the household beside Mr. Borden and the girl? I did not. You did not see anything of Mr. Morse? No. Did you not see him go away? No. Nor did you not see Miss Lizzie out in the yard? No, sir. Or any other person, not a member of the household before the tragedy? No, sir. I did not see anybody pass out there that morning. What was the first thing to which your attention was attracted? I was coming down 2nd Street. I had been to Hunter's Market. I got about halfway between Mrs. Bert's house and mine, and I saw Bridget going from Dr. Bowen's door over to the Borden house, running, and she looked as if she was scared. That was the first? Yes, sir. How far were you then from the house? Halfway between Mrs. Bert's house and mine. I went in my back gate. Were you twice the length of this room? It was a good deal further than that corner. Twice as far, perhaps? I can't get at distances. You and me both, lady. Don't ask me how many feet are 250 feet, because I'm just going to look at you confused. What time, as near as you can judge from everything, was that? I don't know. I think it was about 11 o'clock when I started out of the house, somewhere in that vicinity. I knew I had got to get down street and get back time enough to get potatoes for dinner. So I did have them at 12 o'clock. I only gave it short order, did not stay long there, and came right back. What was the first thing you did? I went into the house, stepped through to the kitchen, laid my parcels on the bench, which runs right across one of the south windows that looks into Mr. Borden's backyard. At the screen door, standing by the screen door, I saw Lizzie as she was in great distress. How did she show that? Perhaps she rubbed her head. I knew something was wrong, of course, by the appearance. I opened one of the south windows. One had a screen in and the other did not. And I says, "What is the matter, Lizzie?" She said, "Oh, Mrs. Churchill, do come over. Somebody has killed father." I went right through the house and went out the front door and went over. When I got there, she sat on the 2nd stair, which is right at the right of the screen door as you come in, the back stairs. Crying? No, sir. I put my hand on her arm this way and said, "Lizzie, where is your father?" She says, "In the sitting room." I said, "Where was you when it happened?" She said, "I went to the barn to get a piece of iron." I said, "Where is your mother?" She says, "I don't know. She had a note to go and see someone that was sick this morning, and I don't know, but they have killed her too." She said, "Father must have had an enemy, for we have all been sick, and we think the milk had been poisoned." Thus she said, "Dr. Bowen is not at home, but I must have a doctor." I says, "Shall I go and try to find someone to go and get the doctor?" Now that I think about it, the milk poisoning is interesting. What year did Louis Pasteur start to pasteurize milk? And what year did that happen in the United States that became normal? Because raw milk can make you very ill if it's not drunk incredibly fresh. That is something to ponder about. Was it truly poisoning in the milk, or was it just bad milk? Or was it simply an excuse all along to cover up a murder? I know that is a popular theory. What was that? She said, "Dr. Bowen is not at home and I must have a doctor." I says, "Shall I go, Lizzie, and try to find someone to go and get one?" She said, "Yes." I went out and ran across the street because I knew the young man that worked for us had gone in a yard where they sell horses, Mr. Hall's yard. With a carriage he had been washing in our yard. He was going out of the yard that day when I went in with my bundles. I went across and called for Thomas Bowles. I says, "Someone has killed Mr. Borden. Go and get a doctor." I don't know where he went. I went back. Soon after I got back, she says, "I shall have to go to the cemetery myself." "Oh, no," I says. "Lizzie, the undertaker will attend to all such things as that for you. They generally do." Very soon Dr. Bowen came in, and I said to him, "He is in the sitting room." Dr. Bowen went directly to the door that opens from the kitchen into the dining room. At the right of the door, as you come into the back entry, just beyond it, and Lizzie and Bridget Bridget had come back. She had been for Alice Russell, a friend of Lizzie's, and had gone back, and Lizzie, Bridget, and I went as far as the dining room. Lizzie sat down on the lounge. Bridget and I stood there. Dr. Bowen went into the sitting room, came out and shook his head and says, "That is awful." He said to me he was very much confused. "Addie," he says, "won't you go in and look at Mr. Borden?" I says, "Oh, no, doctor, I don't want to see him. I looked at him out in the yard this morning. He looked nice to me. I don't want to see him." He says, "Perhaps it is best you should not, or it is just as well." Lizzie says, "Doctor, will you send a telegram to Emma, my sister, for me?" He says, "I will do anything for you." She wished him not to tell the worst, if he could help it, for the old lady where Emma was visiting was feeble. She had better not have the shock. He went out. I think a policeman by the name of Allen came in back of him, and Charles Sawyer, a man that lived below us on 2nd Street. Miss Russell had got there in the meantime and asked Mr. Sawyer if he would please tend the door so that no one would come in that had not ought to come in. So we stayed in the kitchen. I found Alice Russell sat down on a rocking chair with Lizzie, and Lizzie had her head on Alice Russell's shoulder. Mrs. Dr. Bowen came in a few moments and came and stood beside me. Miss Lizzie did not seem to know Mrs. Dr. Bowen. She asked who that woman is. Miss Russell said, "That is Phoebe Bowen." Bridget was in the kitchen at the time. Lizzie says, "I wish someone would go and try and find Mrs. Borden. No, Dr. Bowen said he would like a sheet to cover up Mr. Borden." Bridget was to go and get it. Lizzie told her to go up to a small room adjoining her mother's room. I think she called it a dressing room. I went with Bridget because she did not want to go alone. I stood in the doorway of the little room while she went to the bureau and took out 2 sheets. She says to me, "Is 2 enough?" I says, I should think a plenty." I came downstairs and Dr. Bowen took one, and the other sheet was laid on the dining room table. I am not sure, but she handed me both of the sheets, and I laid one in the dining room table. Dr. Bowen went in, I presume, to cover up Mr. Borden next. Then Lizzie said she was someone would go and try to find Mrs. Borden upstairs, so I went with Bridget. I think Bridget went ahead of me. I got halfway up the front stairs. I got just far enough so my head was level with the front entry floor. I turned my head to the left, and in turning my head to the left, I could see straight across to the spare bedroom floor at the north side of the bed. I saw something that looked like a prostrate form or something. I could distinguish nothing. The room was not light. It was a little darker than downstairs. It looked more than any mat would be on the floor. I turned around and went back. I don't know whether I said out loud, "That must be her." I think Bridget went upstairs. How far she went, I don't know, because I was so shocked. I went downstairs, went into the dining room, and Alice Russell says, "Is there another?" "Yes, she's up there." When Dr. Bowen came in, I says, "Dr. Bowen, you must go upstairs in the spare bedroom." And he went. That part happened while he was out. I don't think he was in there. I can't tell certainly. I told him when he came in that he must go upstairs. After that, there was a great deal of confusion. I did not stay very much longer after that. I went into the dining room, told Lizzie I must go home. If there was anything I could do for her, I was willing to do it. She said perhaps there was something later that I could do. Well, one thing is for certain, we were right in our earlier assumptions that Mrs. Churchill is a gossip. Mrs. Churchill has the mind of a gossip. All those tiny little facts of who said what, when, and where, she has got them clapped down in a steel trap mind. Go her. Before Dr. Bowen came, you came before he did. Yes, we stood in that entry. I went again to find a doctor before he got there. You got back the second time before Dr. Bowen came. Yes. While you were gone, you went to where Thomas Bowles was? Yes, to L.L. Hall's boarding stable on the opposite side of the street. It was after you got back the second time Dr. Bowen came? Yes, sir. Then Miss Russell soon came. Well, you were gone down to Bowles. There was nobody there, as far as you know, but Lizzie and the servant? I left her alone when I went. The servant had not got back from the other errand. Now, on a completely unrelated side note, I am curious about how common the Bowles name is. I'm going to have to look that up for my own personal research because I am related to the bulls of West Virginia and Virginia. And this is just a short distance away geographically in the east. So I'm going to have to go see if any collateral line of mine is related to the bulls in this case. And that's kind of the fun of where looking through the historical documents is it's like, hey, that's not too far away. And I have a familial line there. Could it be? And it gives you a little bit of a break looking at those brick walls that you have been staring at forever and just won't break. There's a chance that you just go on a fun little tangent and you're just like, nah, no, not it. Or it could actually pan out to be something. And you never know until you decide to give it a go. I left her alone when I went. The servant had not got back from the other errand. The first one that came after you got back the second time was Dr. Bowen? Yes, sir. Nobody went into the sitting room to see the body until Dr. Bowen went in? No, sir, not that I know of. When you looked and saw Lizzie in great distress the first time, was she standing inside the screen door? That was before I went over, and I was in my own house, and she stood by the screen door. Outside the door or inside? No, sir, inside, and the door was closed. Then you ran out the front door, around through the yard, and right over to where she was? Yes, sir, from my house. Personally, I wouldn't have noticed, and I wouldn't have gone over. I mean, I'm just saying. Like, if I noticed my neighbor was standing in a doorway looking a little kerfuffled, I would have been like, nah, and then gone about my day. But hey, go for it, Mrs. Churchill. How did you get through the screen door? Did she unhook it? I think I opened it myself. She sat on the stairs as I went in. It was not locked? No, sir. The girl had run again after she came from Dr. Bowen's. Did you see Mr. Morse before you went home? Yes, sir. He came before I went home. About what time in the order of events did he come? Both Mr. and Mrs. Borden had been found when he came. I think I was the first that let him in. I says, Mr. Morse, something terrible has happened. Somebody has killed both Mr. and Mrs. Borden. He says, what? And hollered Lizzie as loud as he could call her and rushed into the dining room. Alice Russell heard him and I think let him in. And he went into the sitting room and the door was closed between the sitting room and the kitchen. That was after both were discovered? Yes, sir. Was it pretty soon after both were discovered? I don't know. Was it before or after Mr. Allen got there? Mrs. Borden was not discovered until after Mr. Sawyer got there because I told Mr. Sawyer and what we thought we had found upstairs. Was there much of a crowd there when Mr. Morse got home? Quite a number out in the yard. They had not got into the house, a great many of them. Where did Mr. Morse come from? The back part of the yard, or from the street. Where did you first see him? He stepped up on the steps. I think he came from the east, the steps that come from the yard, but I am not sure. I can't tell you surely. As your memory is, there were some people in the yard at the time. I think the crowd had come. It is my impression they had. I don't know how much of a crowd there was until I went home. Can you give any impression you think would be of value as to how long a time elapsed after the finding of the first body before the finding of the second? No, sir. I have no idea of that. You knew nothing about the internal affairs of the household? No, sir. They were always the pleasantest to me whenever I was there, whenever I called there. I never passed pleasanter calls than in that house, by every member. You did not know about what tools they kept down cellar? Nothing. Did you know anything about the relations between the girls and their father and mother? I don't. Did you ever notice anything out of the way about them? No, sir. Did you ever notice that they were cordial? I never thought they were as cordial as they might be, but I don't know nothing about it. What was it you observed that led you to think they were not? Because I never saw them together. Anything else? No, sir. I think nothing I can say that I know anything about. I know nothing. They always spoke in the pleasantest terms of each other when I saw them. I know nothing further. As far as you can observe, they went their way and she went her way? Yes, that is all I know about. Did you happen to see Bridget washing the windows inside the house that morning? No, sir. Lizzie said she was in the barn getting a piece of iron. Yes, sir. Did she explain to you then that she was going to do with the iron? No, sir. I never asked her. And she never has explained it? No, sir. Have you now told all you know of all that happened in your presence with relation to that affair? Yes, sir. And all that was said in your presence? I cannot tell you when she said it. I am very particular what I tell. She said once she wished somebody would try to find Mrs. Borden because she thought she heard her come in. Whether she sat on the stairs when she said it, I can't tell you. She thought she heard her come in. I can't tell when she told it to me, whether before or after I went after the doctor. She said it to me. You are sure you did hear it? Oh, yes. Was that the occasion of your going to look for Mrs. Borden? No, sir. After that, she said again she wished we would go upstairs and see if we could find Mrs. Borden. When she said she thought she had heard her come in, was said before she said she wished you would go upstairs? Yes, before that. Well, I'm glad you understood that sentence because I barely did. I had to read it twice. Have you now told all that was said in your presence that you have heard? Yes, sir. Did you see around there any indications of blood, such as bloody clothes or cloths with blood on them? I only went in the kitchen and entry until Dr. Bowen came in, and I saw nothing. No indications, bloody cloths or anything? No, sir, and she looked clean, perfectly clean. What dress did she have on, Lizzie? She had on a blue and white calico. Blue and white with a deeper navy blue diamond on it. Of a deeper shade of blue, this diamond was, as near as I can tell it, I am not observing of clothes. Oh, she's observing of human interactions is what she's observing. She wants all the tea all the time. That is the pattern of the cloth? Yes, sir, the diamond was printed on it. Did she have on an apron? I don't think she did, but I can't tell you certain. Are you sure it was calico? No, it might be gingham. It is cotton goods, I think. It could not have been India silk or anything of that pattern? No, I don't think it was. It was calico or gingham, I think. I do not think she would wear an India silk in the morning unless she was going out. Do you think you would know the dress if you saw it again? I think I should. I never saw it near to, though, until that day. You have described it as fully as you can. Yes, sir. Was it all one piece like the dress you have on now? It was a looser waist, more like a blouse waist. All one kind of cloth as you are now? Yes, sir. Not as she, reporter, is, but all one kind? Yes, sir. Did you see any ironing board in the dining room? I did not. Did you see whether it was there or not? I don't think it was, but I'm not very observing. You did not carry the ironing board out? No, sir. Did you see any signs of ironing anywhere? I did not, to my knowledge. Did you notice the flats on the stove? I did not. You mean by that you did not notice anything about it, not that they were not there. I did not notice anything about it. You know what? I found that fair. Even if she wasn't a gossip, which we've kind of established that she is. I mean, she told everybody about what happened. If you remember all of the police witness statements that we read earlier. But when she ran over, she was expecting some bit of gossip, and instead, she finds out that there's a dead body. And then after that, before she leaves, she finds out that there is a second dead body. So given the circumstances, I am not surprised that a woman who, for appearances, at least for us, is very concerned with human interactions is not noticing whether there are, flats on the stove or an ironing board out. She's more interested in how everybody is interacting with each other. So, personally, I could give her a pass on this. But, let me know. What do you guys think? Is this indicating that there's some issues with what Lizzie has said? We have different opinions on what Lizzie was wearing that day. Is that honest witness confusion? Did she change her clothes multiple times? Could it be an indication of guilt or not? Who took charge of things, of manners out there after this tragedy? Did anybody come in there that took charge of things? No, sir. Do you mean nobody did, or you don't know? I don't know if anybody. Miss Russell looked out for Lizzie and took her in the dining room soon after she came in, and the dining room door was shut. If anybody wished to see her, they had to go in there. You were pretty sure, Mrs. Churchill, that as you remember it, the waist was the same kind of stuff as the skirt. I am. I told you that I'm not observing as a great many. You took it to be the same? I did. Not different kind of cloth of a similar color? No, sir. You say the waist was something of the blouse order. Loose. Belted in? I cannot tell you how it was made. I know it hung loose there because I know Miss Russell thought she would open it to give Lizzie a better chance to breathe. Lizzie says, my clothes are loose. Did you not notice then the dress was the same kind as the skirt? I saw the waist had spots on it of the dark blue. I had seen it before at a distance when she came to the door from my window. It was navy blue with a darker shade of blue and white, a diamond printed on the cloth. And that is it. I can't say I'm terribly happy. I know I've said this before, but I'm not terribly happy how these just end. There's no thank you for your testimony before this inquest. There's no nothing. There's just boom. I made a statement and we're done. But that is how they wrote it. So next time we're going to be looking at Hiram C. Harrington, which, as you know, I have issues with. Why are you investigating your brother-in-law's murder, Mr. Harrington? We didn't know at the beginning of this the two of you were related. This is your sister's brother, and this is your niece who is being looked at by the police, which, as a police officer, you would know because you were involved in the investigation. And there are so many issues with that because it raises the question, can you really be objective? Because either one, you don't like your niece and brother-in-law and are ready to get rid of them, or two, you're ready to cover up anything your niece has done wrong. If you're a police officer out there or in a position of any authority over an investigation and you know the parties involved, please do the morally right thing and recluse yourself. It is not a good look. Just say no to investigating those you are involved with. It is similar how a doctor is not supposed to treat their family members. There's just circumstances when it's right to say no. All right, everyone, that is it for today's episode where I have pretended to be a voice actor and once again failed tremendously. But thanks for sticking around, and I hope you learned a little bit of something, or at least were entertained. Until next time, happy hunting.